Have you ever felt lost, alone, completely unworthy of good things in your life? Today we're going to be talking about my journey from feeling completely broken to recognizing the blessings in my life, how they transpired, and how I began to use them for a greater good. Listen in so that you can realize the links in your story and how you can start to see yourself in a light that sometimes we alone can't fully see.
Hello, and welcome to the Hello You Show, where big dreams meet real action. Through transformative stories, a bit of neuroscience, and real conversations, this show is here to help you explore creating your next level life with authenticity and passion. I am Jessica Rice, a design techie and former engineering leader turned vision evolution coach on a mission to help other women rise up and lead a life of purpose. So get cozy and say hello again to the real you. Hey friends, welcome back to the Hello You Show. My name is Jessica Rice and I am your host. Well, as you know, this whole show is about telling stories that uplift us, telling stories about challenges and triumph. It's really stories about overcoming so that we can become the person that we were intended to be. This is the Hello You Show. Now, oftentimes I have people on the show and we talk about their stories and how they've overcome and what they've triumphed against. And sometimes I've given glimmers of my own story, but today we're going to be talking a little bit more about some of the truths that I started to recognize within myself and what that meant for my own growth trajectory. Now, let me take you back to when I was really young, to a little girl. Now, I don't know about you, but my upbringing at the time, I felt I had the toughest parents. I had the hardest time trying to figure out how to fit in. And I was constantly in this people-pleasing mode. And for many of us, this is where people-pleasing begins, right? When we're little and we're trying to figure out how to make this world work for us. Now, it just so happened that I had these wonderful parents who also came from incredibly broken upbringings. My mother had lost her parents when she was 10 years old due to a horrific car accident that had burst into flames. And so as a little girl, when I was watching my mother also had third-degree burns. She was missing her right hand. And growing up, I became very protective over my mother. And so this started this seed of protection and care within me. And then with my father was an immigrant from Germany. He came here in the 50s, right after World War II, into Georgia, into the South. And so his experience was a little bit different as well, because not many people were very understanding of Germans at that time. And then he enlisted into the Marine Corps at 17 and was off in Vietnam. Both of these experiences, these opposites, really crafted me into the person that I am today. I had the soft, artistic mother who was in fashion design. You've heard me talk about her. And then I had my father, who was this German immigrant who was in Vietnam, in the Marine Corps, and then later became a corrections officer in the state of California. They were polar opposites. And at the time, I couldn't see the beauty in being raised by two completely different people. I also saw in my mother, there was a fracture that had occurred. When you lose your parents, it creates a very deep hole. And that hole was one that I had tried to fill in my youth and had to start to recognize for myself that it wasn't something that I could ever fulfill within my mother. So let's fast forward then to college, right? I'm taking all of these issues that I've carried with me in terms of people pleasing, not feeling like I fully fit in, not seeing my value. And it was around this time, or maybe even a little bit earlier, that I started to realize I just didn't like myself. I actually loathed myself. I wanted other people to like me. I wanted other people to see the value in me, but I couldn't see it in myself. And I developed a bunch of bad habits at that time, including eating disorders, suicidal thoughts, all of these things under the surface that nobody knew about. And for anybody else's perspective, I looked like I was probably doing okay. I was a little bit on the shy side, a little bit quieter. I still was very kind. I was very timid. I was very quiet. I ended up joining the cheerleading squad in my senior year of high school after spending years and years and years in ballet, starting at the age of 6, and trying different ways to fit in. But I never felt whole. I never felt worthy. I never felt like I was good enough. So when I started to progress into those formative years in college, I found myself doing things that weren't really healthy for me. I was forgetting who I was. I was forgetting my Christian upbringing and all of the things that I had been taught about worth. But in those times, worth was really tied to me doing all the right things. And so when I felt like I had fallen, I felt like God had given up on me. I felt like I had nothing else to give, that I was a worthless human. And so I decided at that time to give it all away. And I gave it all away to the very worst person that I could possibly have done. But what I wanted to share was, even though I was going through this incredibly abusive, toxic, manipulative, sick relationship, there were still pieces of me that would come forth and glimmer, that would remind me that there's more that I'm here to do, that there's more to you, that this couldn't be it. And so if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you are at the bottom, the lowest of the low, you have done things that you couldn't tell anyone about, and you have lost all sense of self-worth, I want you to know that you are not alone. And there are so many people, so many women out there, so many men who've gone through abusive relationships, who've experienced these types of things. And I want to tell you that there's always hope. There's always something more that we are to do. And if that story becomes a part of you and that story that you carry forward, maybe so be it. But sometimes we forget that just because we've gone through something, that there isn't something more for us to do. So I did leave that relationship, but not in the way that I had intended, not in the way that I thought I would. I had one of two choices in my mind. I was either going to die, or I was going to muster the courage and just leave. Well, neither one happened. It was somewhere in between, and it became really about a flee of my life. And as I ran out that door, barefoot, wearing just a pair of jeans and a shirt, I realized that there was something alive still in me. And I realized that God had spoken to me and had called to me. See, we had had the worst night the night before that I had ever experienced. I had been hit with a shower curtain rod and was punched in my face. I had blacked out. I had a cracked rib. My face was a mess. My body was a mess. We had been doing drugs, and I had lost so much weight, I didn't look like myself. All of this because I lived under the supreme control of another human being. I had no car. I had no phone. I had nothing other than what he allowed for me to have. When you've lost it all, it can feel super defeating. You start to really wonder what this life is all about. Why are we here? What are we here to do? And so in the moments of fleeing, I never felt more alive. Running barefoot, it was a gravel road, and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I could hear him shouting behind me as I was running, and felt like the driveway, it was pretty long, was the longest driveway in the world. And as I came out to the street and I looked to the left and I looked to the right and I didn't know where I was going to go, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I didn't want to run up the road this way because I knew that would be easy for him to find me. There was nowhere to go there except for the freeway. So I turned left. And as I turned left, I found a house and there was a woman standing outside and she was watering her plants. And it was about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. You can imagine the look on her face as I came running up to her, pleading for my life, literally pleading for my life, for her to rescue me, for her to hide me, for her to keep me safe. And as shocked as this poor old lady was, because I don't know if she was in her 70s or in her 80s, she took me in. She could see my face. She could see how broken I was. And so they let me into their garage as she went and called her husband, not fully aware if I was also a dangerous person, because one could only imagine how I truly looked. I hadn't seen myself even. That day changed everything for me. See, if I hadn't gone through all of that, I'm not quite sure I would have had the same mission, the same purpose, the same drive that I then had throughout the rest of my career. But some things don't leave us, and some things don't fully go away. And so it was still a battle as I later progressed through college, and then as I later started to move up in my career, and as I later started to put myself out there in a greater way, those little inklings, those little words of worthlessness, that you will never amount to anything, that you will always be this. Now, again, in that relationship, the entire aim was to take me from the pedestal that I had been put on down to rubble. Was to take everything about me, everything I stood for, anything from purity to beauty to kindness to joy to love, and reduce it to nothing. Let me tell you, when you start to find yourself again, when you start to realize the power that's within you, it doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be bold. As I often talk about, quiet leaders have an inner strength. I was told that this week, that I may have come across small in some ways, I may come across quiet, but I've lived through things that many haven't. And when you recognize that power, you don't need everything else. Now, what I will say is, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about for this week, and I was reading in my Bible, for many of you who may know, I recently came back to my walk with Jesus, my walk with God. I don't often talk about that. I went on a very long search for a very long time into many different spiritual avenues and learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. But ultimately, I came back to my relationship with God, the one that had been very tarnished, feeling as though I had been left, and realizing that all along He had been beside me. And so as I was reading, it was in Philippians 4:8, it says, if there's any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Now, how often do we get stuck in a loop of worry and anxiety? I know this has very much been a part of my existence. It's why I ended up going into the hospital for ulcerative colitis. It's why my colon ended up rupturing. Stress was the number one cause that they told me. Worry, anxiety, all of the things that were eating up inside of me, my body just couldn't handle. So if you can shift your focus, friends, to thinking about good. What is the good that you bring to this world? What is the good that you are here to do? What is the good in your story, in your message of challenges and overcoming and belonging? And what can you help other people with and share? What is worthy of praise? See, often we think about us being worthy. And when I realized that I was already worthy in the eyes of God, I was already worthy in what it was that He wanted to bring into my life, and I hadn't believed it. I had been unwhole. I had been looking to all the wrong places for acceptance, for knowing how to please others, for filling other people's void. And I left myself completely empty. How can you fill back up your own cup so that you can set those healthy boundaries and that you can then proclaim the message and the story that you are here to tell? That's this show. That's what we're here to do. The women that have come onto this show all have a story. They all have a message. They all have a deliverance that they have come through onto the other side and are here to share it. And I want to know, what's your story? Sometimes I remember feeling like no one's going to understand the things that I have gone through. No one is going to either believe me or be able to relate to me. And so I just stopped sharing it. I stopped talking about it. And I went through my career using it as leverage. But there were pieces of me that were like, this is only one part of me. You don't know what I've gone through to get here. What have you gone through in your life to get where you are today? What have you gone through that you can then share with another individual and to bring them hope and restoration into their being? When I started the show, that's what I wanted to create. I wanted to create a respite that we could come to and that we could start to open ourselves up and to believe again, regardless of the things that have taken place. It's never too late. It's never lost. Everything can be repaired. Everything can be reborn and used for a greater good. So I want you to consider for a moment, what is your message? What is your story? What is your greater good? What are you here to do? What is your calling? So that you can start thinking about how to boldly step out, how to boldly live your life and help other people along the way. This story isn't for me, it's for you. This message isn't for me. It's for whoever out there needs to hear it and needs to know that on the other side of pain can be joy and praise and blessings beyond what we can possibly imagine. And it's not always in the sense of material things. It comes from here. It comes from within. It comes from knowing that we've never been fully alone. I know in that terrible night, I remember hearing in my mind that I would never leave you alone. And I was pleading out in my mind for some help, for some courage, for some way to just get out so that I could be free. I never wanted anything more in my life. I never wanted freedom more in my life. I never wanted to just lead my life on my own terms any time more than in that moment. Because I didn't know if I was going to survive that night. I didn't know. what was going to be around the corner. I didn't know what was going to tip him off. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to get out. And so that very next morning, when I woke up and he had moved the barricade from the door because I couldn't get out, which was a big dresser, and I was very weak at that time, I knew to listen. And I never got dressed faster. I didn't care. I had no bra. I did not care. I put on my clothes. I had no shoes. I did not care. I remember opening the door, looking really fast, and then I ran. And before he even realized what was happening, I was out the door and halfway down the driveway. I was terrified. My face was flush. My heart was pumping. Everything about me never made me feel more alive in that moment. And it changed everything. If you've ever been face to face with terror, you know what I'm talking about. I felt that again when I was in the hospital. But this was strong. Our lives are precious, and we have so much more that we can do with them. And sometimes when we feel lost, we let them dissipate. We let them sit still. We let them do nothing. And we have so much more inside of us, and we allow for fear to hold us back, and we allow for regret to hold us back, and we allow worry and anxiety and a lack of self-worth and a imposterism and all of the things that our brain is telling us, oh no, you remember this, you might want to stay safe, to hold us back. But that's not how we receive blessings in our lives. We don't receive blessings when we play small. We can't touch other people's lives if we don't speak up or do things or act out. And I feel like this cry, this plea for us to stand strong in unison together is even stronger today. Women need to stand arm in arm today with each other, sharing the stories that we've gone through and the experiences and the ways that we've overcome, and helping to lift each other up. We can't always walk alone, but we have each other. And I have had the greatest, most strong women in my life who have helped to carry me at different points. And God has told me I have never walked alone. There's a word that I have in Hebrew in this book of Hebrew words that I read. Kanaf, which means wing. And it says, light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings. Take flight. Take flight in everything that you do. You do not need to be bound. You are glorious, just as you are. Everything that you bring. And from a broken person who could never see the value, who hated the way she looks, who hated everything about her, to someone today who is here to do big work, is here to help other people. And it's no longer about me at all. It's about others. Rise up. Go forth. Be the person that you are called to be. You have it inside of you. You know it. And come share your message. I would love to have you on the show. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear what this is all about. And as women, I made this show initially only for women. But I do feel that there are men too who have gone through things, who have stories to share. We can all learn, and we can all come together, and we can all grow and heal together. That's what this is about. This is what this calling is. In my life, I work on leadership, but in this show, we talk about transformation. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you need someone to reach out to talk to figure out how you share your story in a way that can bring greater hope and work in your life, because I know sometimes bridging the gap between our daily life to doing this important work can feel like a huge leap. Reach out. You can always find me on my socials or just email me. You can email me at jessica@helloyoushow. You can also DM me on LinkedIn. Reach out. Let's have a talk. I want to help you so that you can tell your story and you can feel good and you can step into that calling that I know is inside of you. Stay tuned. We have some new amazing guests who are going to be coming on and sharing their incredible stories. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you for tuning into the Hello You Show. It's been a pleasure to have you with us on this journey today. If you found value in our conversation and want to support the show, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also deeply appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also enables others seeking inspiration and authenticity to discover our community. Until next time, keep embracing your story with purpose.